Hi, my name is Megan Bell, and I'm a medical librarian at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And today I want to go over a database called Clinicaltrials.gov. So first, I want to tell you a little about myself. So I'm a reference librarian and School of Health Professions liaison. So what that means is I'm responsible for the School of Health Professions at UAB. So it's my responsibility to help the faculty with their research, as well as I go into the classes and I teach the students how to use various information resources to complete their assignments. And I also do one-on-one consultations with faculty, staff, and students to help them find information to complete their assignments and work on their projects. I am a native of Southern Louisiana, but please don't hold that against me. I also received my bachelor's degree in biology from Xavier University of Louisiana, and I received my master in library and information science from Louisiana State University. I'm very interested in consumer health information and helping the public to make informed decisions using consumer health information. And because of that, I'm a leader of an initiative called Health InfoNet of Alabama. And it's a group of health sciences librarians from across the state. And we try to work with public librarians as well as other public health organizations to help improve health information literacy across the state, or really specifically helping to helping people access and evaluate consumer health information. So today, my goal is to define what are the key concepts of a clinical trial, like basically what is a clinical trial, that you can recognize the factors, or just I'm gonna very basically address the factors contributing to clinical trial hesitancy among minorities. I'm going to explain the importance of clinical trial diversity, and then we're going to just briefly explore clinicaltrials.gov. So what is a clinical trial? So clinical trials are studies by scientists that test new ways to prevent, detect, diagnose, and treat disease. So with clinical trials, scientists ask volunteers to help them test new things, and those tests can include things such as medicine, like painkillers, or medicines that may lower someone's blood pressure. So they have to have someone to test that on to see, does it really work? Or what are some of the side effects that may happen if someone does take some of those things? So when think of those commercials you see, and they'll tell you side effects may include, all these different things. So they have to have people that they tested on to figure out what the possible side effects are, things like that. Also, it's used to test new vaccines. So various vaccines, not just COVID vaccines, but just many different kind of vaccines. They have to test it on people before it can go to the larger market. But also things such as new devices, like maybe blood glucose testers to see, there's a better device, a better way they can test someone's blood glucose level. So they has to test it on someone. Or also pacemakers. So the bottom picture is someone who has a pacemaker in them. And so they have to have volunteers that kind of test those things out to see whether they're useful. Also, scientists ask volunteers to help test new ways of doing surgery, such as a knee replacement surgery or surgery to repair the heart. So they have to have patients to try to test these new procedures on. So let's address minority hesitancy. So I found a few studies that address this. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but I'm going to bring up a few studies that I found and some reasons as to why minorities are hesitant about participating in research. So one thing is mistrust of the health system. So just based on people's experience with the health system, maybe they had bad experience with their healthcare provider or with various people in the health system, they just don't trust it. So they don't want to volunteer to do any experimental research. And that was a study that was published back in 2010. A more recent article that was published by NPR. So this particular article is just an article, a general article. It wasn't necessarily research that was done per se, but NPR is a well-respected information entity that's out there. So anyway, they found that current hesitancy to participate in research was not necessarily about, so one thing that sometimes people will bring up is Tuskegee, the Tuskegee study that happened several decades ago. And what they found is that this particular article, it included people who were, in their 70s, and said that, when they talked about why they didn't participate in research studies, it wasn't only because of Tuskegee. Many of them didn't even mention Tuskegee, even if they were aware of it, but it was really more current perceptions about the healthcare system and health inequalities and things like that. So it's kind of very similar to a study that was published in 2010 that is really about their current mistrust of the system based on their current experience with the system was the reasons why they were hesitant about participating in research studies. And then also the Endocrine Society back in 2007, they published a paper and they found that one reason minorities don't really participate in studies as much is that sometimes they're just not even aware they're going on. So we certainly can't say that's the case with the COVID vaccination trials, but prior to that, or just, remember I just mentioned that it's not only the COVID trials, but it's also about, a surgery. They need people, it's about surgeries, about medications, about medical devices, all those different things. And sometimes the reason minorities don't participate in some of those studies is because they're not even aware of them. They don't even know that they're there. So that was one issue there. And so, but they did find that if minorities were approached by their healthcare provider, and if they had a good relationship with their healthcare provider, they were just as likely as any other group to choose to participate in that study. So part of it is just, making sure that healthcare providers are aware of clinical trials that may benefit their patients and things like that. So sometimes it's just not being aware. So these are all, larger issues, and it's going to take time certainly to address some things such as health inequities and things like that. But one thing that can help is education, just making sure that people are aware, like they know what clinical trials are, and that they're aware of how do they find them, and know what they're looking at and things like that. So that's what we're going to address today. Just kind of making sure that people are aware of what clinical trials are and how to find them, so that they can we can all make informed decisions about our health. So, if you get the information and you decide that, well, I'm aware of what it is, I know how to find it, I just don't feel comfortable with it, well, that's your choice, of course. But we want to make sure that you can make those informed decisions. So let's talk about the importance of inclusion. Why is it important to participate in clinical trials? Well, it's important because people may experience the same disease differently. And, some things that, may influence how they experience it, and it may affect the outcomes of the different clinical trials that are available, such as, medication and medical devices and different various procedures and things like that. Some things that may affect the outcomes could be their different lived experiences. For example, someone in a rural area versus someone who's in an urban area, those are things to include. Various living conditions are going to affect the results. Race and ethnicity are going to affect the results. Age is going to affect the results, as well as sex and sexual orientation. So we want to have many different groups included in our in clinical studies. So that's why it's really important that different groups are participating. And when we have all these different demographics that are included in clinical studies, all communities can benefit from scientific advances. So when your healthcare provider is trying to, it's very important that healthcare providers stay up to date on, new things or new procedures that are coming out, new information that's coming out. And when they're trying to make a decision as to whether to apply that to your health or to their patient's health, they need to look in a little box that says demographics, because they have to decide, does the patients who were studied in this particular study, do they match my patients? So they're going to look at demographics. And so that's where all these different types of people to include, that's where that comes in place, is that we need to see these different groups that are there so they can kind of decide whether this latest research that's addressing this new drug or this new procedure, will it work for you? Then we need to make sure that all these different groups are represented so they can kind of try to make those informed decisions about our health, which will affect our health outcomes. So with that in mind, let's talk about clinicaltrials.gov. So clinicaltrials.gov is a database of privately and publicly funded clinical trials conducted around the world. And it's basically just a repository or a registry or really it's just like they compile all this information and they make it available so people can search it easily and be able to find this information. So here's a map of where the trials are coming from. So as the definition or the explanation said that it's a registry or a list, or it's a list of registries that are from clinical trials that are going on all over the world. And so this gives you a list of how, of studies that are conducted, how many studies are conducted in different parts of the world. And those are things that are all listed in clinicaltrials.gov. So the public benefits from access to clinical trial information. So for one thing, it helps meet ethical obligations to human subjects. So people can look up information and they can see what study is being done. They can find out information, who's responsible for it, what happened, what were the results of it, all those different things. And we're going to go over a record where you can actually see what kind of information is included in clinicaltrials.gov. It informs future research and future funding decisions. So we don't want to have, the government or various research entities, they don't want to fund something that's already being done, or if someone already did it and they had certain results from it, they don't want to duplicate that and do the same thing if they know something doesn't work. So they want to try to make it better. So having this central location that you can go to look up information, it kind of helps with making research funding decisions, and informs future research. Mitigates information bias. So whenever researchers perform these research studies, the goal should be, it's really to try to provide this information. The goal should be for them to publish this information so that other researchers, not only researchers, but even patients, people in general, public, so that people in general can read about the research they did and try to make informed decisions about their health. But sometimes there are studies that are done and they don't get published in journals, in scholarly journals. So it's a good idea to check clinicaltrials.gov, because maybe a clinical trial was done, but maybe they never actually did a scholarly article on it. So it kind of helps address that situation where when you're looking for information, you don't only look, or when researchers are looking for information, or scholars, academics, looking for information, general public as well, whoever is looking for information, that you don't only look at scholarly journals, but you also want to check just to see if a clinical trial was registered and maybe they just never published their results in a scholarly journal. It evaluates research integrity, so you can see whether they actually adhere to their protocol. So the protocol gives you information on what the researchers say they're going to do in this study. They're going to have steps that they explain to all the research participants. They're going to say, okay, our step 1 is we do this, step 2 is we do this, step 3 we do this. And so you can actually look in their protocol and make sure they're actually doing what they said they were going to do. Again, it prevents trial duplication of unsafe or ineffective intervention. So if something is not working, if you're getting really bad outcomes, really adverse effects, you can make sure you don't actually do that same thing again. If it's been published, if you can look in this clinical trial registry and you see that someone, they tried this particular thing, and when they did this, they had a bad outcome, then someone else can look up that information and say, okay, we want to make sure we don't do the same thing because something bad happens when we do that. It provides access to data that support evidence-based medicine. So evidence-based medicine means that whenever you have a certain condition, you want to make sure that you want to look at other studies that were done related to a particular population, and a particular intervention was done, or a particular thing was done to address a certain disease or a certain condition. And then you want to see, okay, what was the outcome from this, and how can I apply, what can I learn from this study and apply it to my patients? So that's what's called evidence-based medicine, is that you look at studies that are done and you look at the outcomes you look at what happened when they did that particular study, and then you figure out, how can I apply, or is this useful information for me to apply to my patients to help them have better results as well. And having clinicaltrials.gov, which is free, is a free database that's available to the public. Anyone can use it as long as you have internet access. It enhances patient access to clinical trials so that you can find out, maybe you have a certain condition and maybe the medication or the treatment that you've been taking isn't really working very well. So maybe you can look on clinicaltrials.gov and see maybe there's an alternative thing that you can do, alternative treatment that maybe you can try. And so having that access gives you gives you options, and other treatment options that are available to you. And overall, it contributes to increased public trust in clinical research. So it's kind of open and transparent, and people can see what's going on, and that can help them make informed decisions. So who uses clinicaltrial.gov? Patients and their families use clinicaltrials.gov, as well as scientists and researchers. So patients and their families is a centralized place to search for trials by condition, location, and other trial characteristics. So you can say, I want to look for trials that are in Alabama. I want to look for trials that, I'm not sure if it goes down to cities, so we'll see when we go there, but you may be able to say, I want to know other trials in Birmingham, whatever. You can look by condition, so you can say, okay, I want to know what clinical trials are being done related to breast cancer, or related to knee replacement therapy, a knee replacement surgery, whatever. You can see like what's being studied right now, and you can see are they currently accepting research participants. Or you can also see if the study is already concluded, and you can see what were the results of that, and then maybe those are some things you can talk about with your healthcare provider. It includes a comprehensive list of ongoing trials for people interested in enrolling in a clinical trial. So it's another treatment option that may be available to you that you need to discuss, that you must discuss with your healthcare provider. And so a director of the National Institute of Health, this is a government agency, a US government agency, and this particular person said that access to more information about clinical trials is good for patients, the public, and science. So what this means is that having this access to this information is good for patients. So it gives you more treatment options that you can discuss with your healthcare provider. It's good for just the public in general, for people to be aware of what's out there. And it's good for science. It can help people make informed decisions, help researchers not reproduce research that's already been done, and they can begin to look at all that information that's out there and come up with a recommendations. Now, some limitations of clinicaltrials.gov, things I want to make sure you're aware of, is that just because something is listed on clinicaltrials.gov, it does not mean it has been evaluated by the US federal government. So people log on to clinicaltrials.gov and they post their information there, but the US government doesn't evaluate whether what they're telling you is legitimate or not. So you have to use your own critical appraisal or your own evaluation skills to kind of figure that out. And you can also, again, it's why it's important to talk to your healthcare provider. You can mention that, hey, I found this particular clinical trial on clinicaltrial.gov. What do you think about it? And do you think this would be a good option for me? And then you and your healthcare provider can talk about that. But you can also do things like, we're going to go over those records, but you can look at, they're going to tell you like who's responsible for this research, where is it? And you can also always go online or ask a family member, ask someone you trust to go online and help you research that particular organization to see whether they're legitimate or not, and whether you trust them. So they are posting information about their study, but you can do your own further research to see whether that particular group is someone you want to trust to enroll in that study. Also be aware that not all studies listed on clinicaltrials.gov are funded by the US government. So they're not necessarily evaluated by the US government, and they're not necessarily funded by the US government. Some of them are, but some of them are not. So here are some questions you should ask. If you find a study on clinicaltrials.gov and you're thinking about enrolling in it, some questions you should ask, definitely if you decide to contact the people, or also when you talk to your healthcare provider, some questions you should ask would be, what is being studied? So make sure from the record you understand what's being studied, or if you contact the people, ask, well, what is being studied? Make sure you really understand that. What will I have to do? So make sure you understand what they're asking you to do. What tests and procedures are involved? How do the possible risks, side effects, and benefits of this trial compare to those of my current treatment? So if you have a certain condition and you're already being treated and you already are getting a certain treatment through your healthcare provider, and you want to try something else, you need to know like what are the pros and cons of you trying this new treatment. So again, talk to your healthcare provider about this, as well as the people who are conducting the study. Clinicaltrials.gov lists many other questions that you should ask. And so if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, and we'll visit this, you can actually see a list of questions that you want to make sure that you ask. So that was information for patients and their families, but information on clinicaltrial.gov is also available for clinical researchers. So they use this to perform, they use this particular resource to post information about clinical trials, but they also use it to search for information on clinical trials. So if they're thinking about performing a certain study, they want to make sure that someone else is not already doing it. So they'll search this particular resource to make sure no one else is doing this study. And they also use this particular resource when they're doing their own research. And so they want to gather all the information that has been done on a particular condition to address a particular research question that they have. And then sometimes they take all that information and kind of synthesize it, or kind of like summarize all that information to figure out like what's the final outcome of all the literature that's been published on this particular topic. What's the final assessment of it? You know, so what are the overall results of it? So clinical researchers do use this resource to kind of find information as well. And they can download all the study records for analysis. So basically they gather all this information and then they analyze that information. And then finally, summary of results. So 1 year after the studies are completed, summary results, or their final analysis, are posted to the registry. So you can go to clinicaltrials.gov to look for studies that are currently enrolling, or you can also look for things that are already completed, and you can read what were the final results of that, and you can discuss that with your healthcare provider. So now we're going to go live, and I'm going to show you the website and how to use it and how to do a search. So we are on clinicaltrials.gov, and the URL is just clinicaltrials.gov. And so here's the basic search box here. So you could type in the condition or the disease here. So it has example breast cancer, if that's what you want to find information on. Or you can type in other terms. They have examples here. You can have a drug name, or if you have a particular investigator, like a particular person you're looking for, not person, but if there's if there's someone who's doing a clinical trial, there's someone who's in charge of the actual clinical trial, and you know that person's name, you could search for that in this box. Or if you want to limit your search to a specific country, you can do that here. So if you want to look for breast cancer, but only within the United States, you can do that here. And we'll come back to that later. So I do want to look here. It currently is giving you how many research studies are included in all 50 states of the United States and in 220 countries. Here it has things that are listed that are specific to COVID-19. I want to point out this disclaimer information here. So it says, read our disclaimer for details. And it also says, before participating in a study, talk to your healthcare provider and learn about the risk and potential benefits. So they're letting you know up front that you need to make sure you talk to your healthcare provider, and there are risks, or, there could be benefits from it, but there could also be risk from it. So you need to make sure, again, you're informed about your decision. So read our disclaimer. So we click on this. It takes you to a disclaimer, and it basically says the same thing that I said earlier, that just because a study is listed on this site does not mean that the US government has evaluated it. And it also doesn't mean that it's funded by the US government. So again, make sure you evaluate information that you find, look up information on the group that's performing the study, and try to find out as much information as you can. So I'm going to go back. At the top of the screen, there are these drop-down menus. So if you want to find a study, you can do that here. They have more information on how to read a study record. We're going to go over that too. How to search for results. So you forget something I say here, you can always go to the website and look here for how-to video, or what, not videos, but how-to information on how to search this particular website. And they have about studies. So You can learn about studies, learn about other sites about studies, glossary of common site terms. So I'm going to click on this, go over the glossary. All right. So here you may see in the records that we're going to go over, but you may see words like adverse event. What does that mean? Age group, or all these different words or phrases. You may not, and maybe you're unsure as to what that means. You can go to the glossary and it gives you a definition of what the record means when it uses certain terms. So that can help you understand what you're reading. I'm going to go back. There are also resources here. And so it gives you information on how to download content for analysis. You can read information about selected publications if there are some things there. Let's see what's there. So these are articles about various topics or are related to clinicaltrials.gov, and you can always read any of these if you're interested. And here's information about the site, what's new, gives you some background information on clinicaltrials.gov. It's always important whenever you're going to a website to always look at the About Us page or anything that says about, because that gives you some information on like the organization, who's responsible for the content. It helps you evaluate whether you should trust that particular resource. So About Us gives you information on the website, history, laws, policy, all those things like that. So you can figure out whether you want to trust the resource or not. So I'm going to go back to our homepage. And I'm going to do a search. So I'm going to do a search for breast cancer. And to type it in, it offers me some suggestions. And I'm going to select breast cancer. And I'm going to click search. So here are a list of results. So it found over 11,000 results for breast cancer. It's because it's so broad. I didn't specify anything about it. I don't have anything like, what about breast cancer? There could be so many things with breast cancer. I want to talk about acupuncture, chemotherapy, whatever. So the more words I put in, the less results I would get. But right now I'm getting over 11,000. And it's saying that when I put in the word breast cancer, this database automatically also search for the words such as, or phrases such as breast neoplasm, breast carcinomas, all those different things. And if I click on see search details, I see it breaks it down for me. And I see breast cancer tells me how many results I get. If I say breast neoplasm, this is how many results I get. So all these different things I can look at, and it tells me how many results that I'm getting if these particular terms are used. Also, if I just say cancer, it tells me how many results. I can also look at related terms. So if I click on any of these things, it's going to add it to my search. So right now I just have breast cancer, but let's say I want to add in chemotherapy. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, chemotherapy. So if I click on chemotherapy here, it takes me back here, and notice before I had 11,000 results and now I only have 3,500 results, because now it's searching for breast cancer and chemotherapy. So it's pulling in clinical trials that are about breast cancer and chemotherapy. I'm also gonna, so I have these tabs here. I'm back to the list. I'm gonna click on map. So when I click on map, I see that the search term I'm using related to chemotherapy and breast cancer is showing me this map, because remember, this has clinical trials from all over the world, and it's showing me how many clinical trials in different countries or not, well, different countries or and continents, how many clinical trials there are related to breast cancer and chemotherapy. And if I scroll some more, I can actually see by continent, by region, how many are there. And if I click, so right now I've clicked on the United States, and now I see by state how many clinical trials are there related to breast cancer and chemotherapy for each state. So in Alabama, there are 136. But those include things that are already completed as well as things that are currently enrolling. So we can drill down a little bit more and make it more specific. And now by topic. So I see here, I have things about chemotherapy and breast cancer, but now I can make it even more specific. I can see how many related to various things, how many clinical trials are published related to that topic, and these as well. So if I wanted to know about breast cancer, chemotherapy, and alopecia, there are 20 studies that are in here on that. So if I click through these different pages, I can see how many studies there are. So I'm going to go back to the list. Now, if I look here on the left, these are called filters, and I can add filters. So let's say I only want to know studies that are enrolling by invitation. No, I'm not going to do that one. Completed. Studies that are completed. If I wanted to add a certain age group, I can do that. If I wanted to add a certain sex, I can do that. Study type, different kind of study types. If I want to pick one. Study results, do I want some things here or have the results published with it? Some of them don't. So I want things with results. There are different study phases, so I can pick one if I wanted to. Funder type, if I wanted to do a certain type, because remember that many different organizations submit their clinical trials to clinicaltrials.gov. They're not necessarily all coming from the National Institute of Health. So, but if I wanted to make sure it was a National Institute of Health or another U.S. federal agency, then I can, select those, and I will only get those results. And I can do study documents, and I can see if I want to see like informed consent or study protocols or whatever, I can limit it to that as well. I'm not going to do those things. I'm just going to do completed, and I'm going to click apply. So now I'm down to 383. And I'm going to click on one of these results. I'm going to just click on this first one. So I'm going to go back first though. So we look at all these different things here. So status, it says completed. Study title, this tells you what it's about. Condition, it's about breast cancer. Intervention, it tells you what they did. And location, it tells you where it was. So this one was in Dallas, Texas. So I'm going to click on it. So here again, there's a disclaimer, lets you know that just because something's published here doesn't necessarily mean that has been evaluated by the U.S. government. And it doesn't mean that they funded it. Here it gives you information on the recruitment status. So it's already completed. It lets you know when it was posted to this particular website. Here it tells you who's the sponsor and who's the responsible party. So this is where you want to look if you want to do some more research on your own and figure out, is this someone I want to trust? Is this an organization I want to trust? Look to see who's the responsible party, and then you can look up information on that particular group. So here, the Baylor Research Institute, that's who's responsible for this particular study. Here, there's information on a brief summary. What's the study about? What's the condition? It tells you here the intervention, what phase they're in. And remember, if you have any questions about like, what is phase 1, what's phase 2, what does that mean? You can go to the glossary and find out. Here's a detailed description on what they're doing or what they did. It tells you the study type, how many people enrolled in it, whether it was randomized. And again, you can look in the glossary to find out what these things mean. When was it completed? If you want to find more information, the National Library of Medicine they have other databases. And so there's something called Medlineplus, and you can look up information if you want to find out just a basic information on like what is breast cancer, what are, whatever it was, you can find, if you want to find basic information, you can click on Medlineplus and it would take you to that particular website, and you can look up information on the topic if you want to better understand it. Here it tells you about different arms of the study and what they did. And again, this information you can either, pull up on your phone with your doctor or print it out and bring it to your doctor and discuss it with them. It tells you what the outcome measures were, what the outcomes were. It tells you who was eligible to participate in the study. And that's pretty important because you have to kind of look at the demographics and see whether those demographics match you or or if the person, it was your physician, they have to kind of look at, or your healthcare provider, they have to kind of look at it and figure out, do the demographics in this study match the patient that they're thinking about? It has to make sure that it matches. And then here they see some more inclusion criteria, things to look for. And here's more information about the study documents. These tell you their protocol, what they did, more information. When was it last updated? So things like that. And you can take this information and share it with your healthcare provider and kind of decide whether this is something that will be a good option for you. I'm back on the home page, and so now we're going to try searching a different way. First, we did the basic search. Now we're going to do an advanced search. Click on advanced. And here you see just all these different boxes that are here. So this time we're going to look for vertigo. It's there. And we're going to select, here it says status. We're going to select recruiting. So we're looking for studies that are currently recruiting. And we're going to say adult, where it asks for age. We're going to say age group. We're going to say adult. And we want to limit it to United States. So we're going to scroll down the country. And we're going to say United States. And here you can even, if you want to be more specific, you can even put in a city or what state, you can put in a state. So I'm going to just see, let's just try Alabama, see if anything comes up. And we're going to click search. All right, so we got 0 results. So now we're going to say, we're going to go back. And we're going to leave this one blank. We're going to just say United States. And we're going to click search. All right, now we are getting some. So we see here some different studies that are being done related to vertigo in the adult population, and they're currently recruiting. And if you looked here, you would see, where those studies are being done. So, here it says California, Texas, Maryland, Colorado, different places. And so, if it was somewhere that was near you, then you can, talk to your provider and decide whether that was a good option for you. If you have any questions, here's my contact information, and so feel free to contact me.